I speak to you in the name of one God, holy and undivided Trinity. As many of you know, last weekend, Emmanuel, along with homes and businesses in Chestertown, had our pride flag and banner stolen. It turns out it was a group of young men from Pennsylvania, and from what I have learned, it was an act born of hatred for LGBTQ people. I, like many of you, was angry. And while it may seem a bit odd to get so riled up over a small theft, a flag, it is about far more than a flag. It was and is about the dignity of people, LGBTQ people, people made in the image of God. And before we get too comfortable saying, oh, well, they were from out of town, they're not us, we all know that is not entirely true. We know that prejudice infects this community too, infects all communities. And as awful as it is, the sad truth is that we as a nation have a history of othering, of treating groups of people shamefully, those with black and brown skin, Native people, Asians, Catholics, Italians, Irish, Polish. We have a history of identifying a group as less than human and inflicting both physical and psychological pain on them. And most horrifyingly to me, many have justified this othering, this demeaning of human beings in whom we are to see the face of Christ, with Bible quotes. And many still do, especially as we see the rise of white Christian nationalism, a perversion of both faith and patriotism, people hiding their own prejudices and hatred behind God and wrapped in a flag. One of the hardest things about all this is that I, and I am guessing you, sometimes feel helpless. We cannot fix this, cannot just make it stop. We can raise our voices, we can be clear about who we are and what we believe. We can communicate that to others, to our elected officials, but to a large extent, it is beyond our control, which is a tough place to be, leaving us both frustrated and anxious, sort of like being in a boat in the middle of wildly stormy seas. I can relate to the disciples who were terrified in an out-of-control situation. And there is Jesus snoring away, sleeping as if he did not have a care in the world. I would be right with them thinking, what is wrong with you? Get up and fix this now. In fact, I've had a few go-rounds with God this week, pretty much saying exactly that same thing. What is wrong with you? How can you let this happen? And all I got back was silence. And then I reread the texts for today, and I realized I want to be like Job. Not the having everything I love destroyed, sitting on a dung heap, scratching open sores with a piece of pottery Job. Rather, I want to be like Job because I want to sue God on behalf of a whole bunch of people. I want to sue God over a world of hurt. Job sues God because he loses absolutely everything he has: his cattle, his camels, his farm equipment, his children, his wife, all gone in an instant. He sues God because he knows he has done nothing to deserve what is happening to him. Unlike the disciples in the boat who can see Jesus sitting right there, although doing nothing, Job cannot even see God. Yet somehow Job knows, Job trusts that God is present to his suffering, interested in him. And so, in an act that seems both audacious and sacrilegious, but is actually an act of deep trust, Job sues God. Job believes that God will show up in the courtroom, and Job believes he will get a fair trial because he knows God is just. So Job sets about figuring how exactly one sues God. He first worries about getting a subpoena together and delivered. The translations I'm going to use from the book of Job are by the Reverend Dr. Will Gaffney, a preeminent womanist scholar. Who will grant that I might know where I might find God, that I might come to God's abode? I would set my case in order before God and fill my mouth with arguments. So after thinking the subpoena problems through, Job concludes that he also needs to find an advocate, someone from his family or his people who will speak for him, who will bail him out. This was the system set up by Moses. If you were in any sort of legal trouble, a relative would serve as your redeemer. So who would do that for Job? His relatives all abandoned him when he lost everything. His friends, too, let him down, telling him he is a hopeless case. But Job is determined, saying, I know that my Redeemer, my advocate lives, who will at the last stand on the earth. And after my skin has been so destroyed, then in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see on my side, and my eyes shall behold, and not another. That advocate, the one who stays with him when everyone else has abandoned him, the redeeming relative is, of course, God. And so, as Job is sitting, case organized, desperately hoping that the defendant, God, will show up, God does so in the middle of a whirlwind, and God blows up the courtroom. And rather than setting about explaining the holy self, God demands that Job answer. Who is this that darkens counsel by speech without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you will answer me. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Don't you know that I am the mother of ice and snow, birthing them out of my own womb? Don't you know that I am the father of the rain? Have you given marching orders to the sun every morning from the time before time? Did you plant the stars in the heavens, joining them into constellations? Who do you think you are? Don't you know who I am? And all Job can do in the face of God is put his hand over his mouth. And the speech from God we just heard is pretty much the extent of the answer Job gets. God never answers Job's why question. But the book of Job also does not ignore or whitewash pain and suffering. It looks Job's suffering squarely in the eye. And at the same time, it affirms a God who is there, a God who is with us, a God who responds, albeit a God who does not do what we want or think we want, a God who does not operate on our timeline, but whose vision, understanding, wisdom, out of which God acts, are beyond anything we can comprehend. When Job meets God face to face, Job says, I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see you. I reject all of this, and am comforted in dust and ashes. Having an encounter with God, you see, was enough. Knowing God was engaged was enough. The book of Job bears holy witness to the truth of the victimized and the devastated who know that life is not fair. You don't always get what you deserve, that the innocent do suffer, and God is in many ways inscrutable. Yet it asserts that God is real, that God is ultimately just, that God is engaged in the world, and God will listen when you give God a piece of your mind about what God is doing to you and to the ones you love. That's exactly what the disciples do in the gospel. And that's exactly what we do anytime we raise an angry fist to God and bellow at the heavens. Job teaches that even if you are crazy enough to sue God, God will come to meet you where you are. God will speak a word that may not change your circumstances, but it will change you. God spoke to Job from chapter 38 to chapter 41, 129 verses. And in all that time, God did not change a single thing in Job's life. God changed Job. So what? What's the conclusion? I don't know that there is one from the story of Job or from the disciples in the boat or for the terrified and marginalized throughout this world. There is no nice, neat conclusion, at least not in this life. But the bottom line, the eternal truth, is that the source of all hope is that Jesus is in the boat with us. It is the truth that God shows up, often cleverly disguised as another human being, but sometimes not. It is the truth that God is, in fact, just. It is also the truth that God will listen to our outrage. We can bug, pester, harass God, and God will not disappear. We, every person who ever lived, are God's people. And God has pledged to stay with us and ultimately to reconcile all the earth in justice and peace. So what happens for us individually, what happens for each of us next, we cannot know. But we do know that we are not in this alone. We have each other. We have the inscrutable God of Job. We have the enfleshed God of the disciples and the restless, justice-creating, ever-loving God of you and me. May it be so.